Well, hey there, everyone. Hope your day is going well. It is another edition of Ask Mike. Alyssa Orange here alongside Mike Irwin with another stack of questions to answer.
This studio is cold.
It is cold in here. I hope you guys are staying warm.
It's cold in here.
It is really cold in here.
My questions are going to be frozen. My answers are going to be frozen.
Let's hope
you
not.
See me shivering because it's cold in here.
It's cold everywhere. I mean, we have the house at my house set at like 72, and I'm still cold. So it's just kind of, what we're dealing with right now. So, all right, we're going to jump right into it. I am Hog Holio.
That's right. Hog Holio. We've had him on before.
Yeah. With the status quo being 8 teams in the nation having a legitimate opportunity to reach the peak, I'm wondering if 8 wins is our best expectation, with 6 being the norm, along with a minor bowl every year. Okay, he's clearly talking about football.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's kind of mixing up two things, I think. I mean, let's start with this whole business of the same teams always getting the playoff every year.
Right.
And people think it's made football boring because when the season starts, there's a certain number of teams, like maybe 6 teams, that think they can legitimately get into the playoff system. And that part of it rotates. I mean, but it's been about 6 or 7 teams that always get in. And then the national championship revolves around about 3 or 4 teams. So, like, it makes everything boring, and, when the season starts, you're just going, well, we can't do that. Mm-hmm. That's an issue that doesn't have anything to do with how good Arkansas can be, in my opinion, but it does have to do with what I've said before, which is you need more teams in the playoff. Mm-hmm. Because if you start putting more teams in there, like 8, or if you went to 16, the more you add to that playoff, the more upsets you get into the mix, and then you get away from this boring cycle of the same teams over and over again. Why are the same teams getting in there? Because you have a selection committee. And when you have a selection committee, they're going to select the same people over and over again. But if you had a system where you earned your way in by wins and losses in different conferences, it would vary a little bit. And then once you throw in extra teams in the playoffs, you're going to get upsets. And right now you're not having very many because there's not enough games.
How do you feel this playoff system has fared with teams? Obviously UCF made a really big argument a year ago or a couple of years ago when, you had Coastal Carolina this year making a splash with what they were playing in. And I get that it was a little different with conferences, and I'm not comparing the two, but would that open the door for a team like that to maybe, make a run?
Absolutely.
And then, is that fair? Is it fair for them to be able to have that opportunity?
I think it's fair, and I think it also, when you put a team like that in there, you increase the chances of an upset because they're going to play hard. Once they get in there, hey, as long as you don't pair them against Alabama right off the bat. And it's why the NCAA basketball tournament is a lot more interesting than college football playoffs. You can't even compare those two things because the tournament is a really cool thing that goes on, and there's upsets and weird things happening, and it's exciting, and you can't always predict. I will agree, college football has gotten stagnant with this same stuff. Alabama, LSU, Alabama, Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, it just keeps over and over and over. And it makes it boring, and you almost look at the regular season and go, what are we doing this for? Now, that's a separate issue from what he asked about Arkansas. And I've said this before, and I continue to say it. If you have the right coach at Arkansas, you can win 8, 9, 10 games a year. It's been done several times. I've seen it done. You just have had the wrong coaches lately. Frank did it. He did it all through the 60s. They won 1 national championship and almost won 2 more. They were in the top 10 a lot in that decade. So you're winning, and they played fewer games in those days, but you're winning 9 and 10 games under Frank most years. Lou came in, and he got off to a hot start, almost won a national championship and had 2 or 3 good teams, slacked off. Hatfield came in, and he started slow, but by the time he finished, he was winning 9 games one year, 10 games the other. Then it fell off when they went into the SEC, but Houston Nutt had a couple of really good years, and then a lot of things happened there that weren't normal. But then you get into Petrino. I mean, he had Arkansas rolling before he ran into that tree stump.
It's always hard to say what Arkansas football would have been had that motorcycle accident not happened.
The point is, maybe Sam Pittman is it. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But that's what they need, is the right head coach with the right staff. And there's nothing about Arkansas that says you have to win 4, 5, 6 games a year. You can be up there. You can be up there in the SEC. You got to have the right coach with the right staff.
All right. Pat Boat asks, do you ever see C.J. Ogrady making the NFL?
Probably not. He's got the talent. Everybody knows that. He can't get out of his own way. He keeps doing things to make. He hurt himself when he was at Arkansas because he reinvented himself about 3 times. Okay, I'm going to do better. He even changed his name. Remember when it went from
CJ to Cheyenne,
and
which
then
is
back.
His real name. He had always gone by CJ.
Yeah, but the point is he changed his name to try to get a fresh start, and he'd roll along there pretty good, and then he'd have more problems. And then his senior year, which is the most important year, and he did have some really good moments his senior year, he did that thing where whatever happened in there with Chad Morris, where Morris basically said, with 2 games to go, you're out. The NFL doesn't want to hear that. If he was a great player, a can't-miss prospect, then maybe, yeah, pardon me, get rid of that. Maybe then, he wouldn't have had problems. But when you're kind of borderline, you got to prove yourself, and then you got that stuff going on. And I can only guess that when he did these one-on-ones with NFL teams, they didn't like what he had to say. Now, he did go down and he worked out with the Cowboys. We don't know what happened there, but that didn't lead to anything. What I know is that he's working out, still trying to, he's working out with Steve Conley, who's a former Razorback, and if anybody can get him rolling on the right track, it's Steve Conley, because he's a good guy and he knows how to motivate. So we'll see how that goes. But right now, I just have to say it's a long shot.
And that might be like the hardest story since I've covered Arkansas is to see a guy like C.J. Ogrady with so much talent, like raw talent, the size, the hands.
The way he jumps and can go after a ball.
And to see it now, like you just said, that it sucks.
Yeah.
It's the best way. It's the best way to put all of that situation. All right, Razor Boo wants to know, with the extra year of eligibility, do you see any of the basketball grad transfers playing for the Hogs in 21-22?
It's amazing how many people don't know that they can come back. Most people are under the impression that all of those extra year eligibility things, that all happened in 2020. And once we got into 2021, it was over. Well, it's not. It's anybody, it's all the fall and winter sport athletes. And I think, I don't know if it applies to spring sports. We're not there yet, so I'm not sure, but I doubt it because they've already allowed spring sport guys to come back in baseball.
Right.
But it definitely applies to basketball. So the issue is, will some of these grad transfers come back? Nobody seems to know for sure. You've got the same issue of your guy like Eric Musselman. Even though the NCAA will allow you to have extra guys on your roster and they can be on scholarship, that doesn't mean you have the budget for it, because you've still got to figure out how you can meet your budget. Now, I got to believe that a guy like Jalen Tate or Justin Smith said we were coming back, Musselman go, that's great. I'll do that. Maybe not other people. I don't know. But what I'm told when I ask around about this is that the pressure to make money for a guy in that position, now you're talking about 5th-year senior. These guys have been around the block. And they're in their 20s now. You could, even if you don't go to the NBA out of college, you can go overseas and make some pretty good money. And if you can do it for about 10 or 12 years, you can put aside a lot of money, and then you decide what your career is, and you got a nice nest egg. You can buy a house. You just pay cash for a house, buy a car. And you start off way ahead of normal people that come out of college, and they've got all these bills to pay, and they're making $60,000, $70,000 a year. You've already been way beyond that. So they want to start doing this as soon as possible. So there's a lot of pressure on a grad transfer, if he's good enough that he can play overseas and make money, to say, well, I might come back, but yeah, I can't turn that money down. So I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, basketball is a lot harder than football is because, and even baseball, because when you're in the minor leagues, rookie ball, you're not making a lot of money.
Right.
You're spending a lot of time on a bus. You're living in an apartment somewhere. You're not making a lot of money. Football, it's the NFL or else kind of thing.
What are you going to do?
You're not making any money.
Right.
But there's so many options with basketball, like you said. You can play overseas. You can play in Australia. you know, you could play here
South
and still
America,
make
Central
good,
America.
make good money in the G League even. And there's just a lot more options that are appealing for basketball players than there are any other sports.
And it makes it much less likely that somebody like that would stay.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Peacock asks, any idea why the NCAA pulled the plug on our VIP cutouts for the upcoming indoor track meets? I know they're still fighting to control the athlete's likeness, but now they want to control mine. I hadn't heard about this. I'm interested.
Okay, it's not personal. The first thing I need to explain is that when the NCAA comes in and hosts an event on your campus, it's their event.
Yeah, they wipe everything out.
They take control. You're not in charge. They tell you how it's going to be done. They bring in their people. You may help them, but they are in charge. Now, the people over there at the track complex, Tyson Center, they believe this really has more to do with space for the athletes. You get all of those NCAA teams in there for a national meet. Even though it's a big building, it's got a lot of seats in there. You have to have a lot of seats for those athletes while the event is going on. And especially right now, with the weather can be as crazy, and we don't know what it's going to be like, but if it's like it is right now, everybody's going to want to be in there.
Right.
They'll be running around outside.
No.
So they just wanted to make sure that there was plenty of space in there, so you take those cutouts away and you've got plenty of places for people to sit down.
Sure.
Another possibility is, and we've seen this in NCAA baseball regionals, where the NCAA tells Arkansas you can't have your locker room. You have to dress at home because these guys are dressing in their hotel rooms and they're coming on a bus and they arrive already dressed. Well, you have to do that too. We're not going to allow you to have creature comforts that they don't have. You're in this tournament, you're just like any other team coming in from the outside. So maybe somebody at the NCAA said, you know what, these other teams that are bringing athletes in here, they don't have cutouts of their fans. We're not going to let you have cutouts of your fans.
Well, I think it's important to point out, I mean, look, again, like you've mentioned, when it's not even the NCAA, but that's what we're talking about, comes in and hosts a national event somewhere, they are covering up anything and everything they can unless it's ingrained into the ground and you can't cover it up to make it as neutral as possible. And you look at, for example, baseball season. I'm pretty sure the Texas Rangers had to take all of their cutouts out of the stadium so that they could get fans in because they were hosting, you know, the NLDS and the World Series. You know, same thing with the Dodgers. The Dodgers had to take out all of their cutouts because they were hosting some of the ALCS games, and those Dodger cutouts were taken out of the stadium. They're just trying to make it as neutral as possible. So it's not just the NCAA. It's anytime it's a national event that you just happen to be the host location. You're not necessarily the host team.
It's not personal. They didn't do it to you, even though your cutout may be gone. They didn't do it for that reason.
Yeah. And look, Arkansas still gets a lot of national recognition for having events like this on their campus. So, yeah. All right, turning to the women's basketball team, where does Chelsea Dungey rank among all-time best players? That's from VB Mark.
Yeah, most people over the years have always said it was Betty Fiskus. You know, she played in the old Southwest Conference days, ended up married to James Dickey, who was one of Eddie Sutton's assistants. She currently still holds the record for most points scored for a long time, most points total. I think Todd Day or somebody passed her at one point. She's got 2,073 career points. Dungey at this point has 2,004. There's no way to know how many games she has left, but I'm going to conservatively say that Arkansas women will probably play about 7 more games. They've got 4 games regular season. Maybe if they play two SEC tournament games and 2 NCAA tournament games, that'd be
minimum,
6 or 7 or 8 games, something like that. At that rate, all she would have to do is average around 10 points a game for the remaining games, and she'll break the record. Well, she's currently averaging 22.
Yeah,
so
I'm laughing because she's currently averaging double that.
So it's just almost a no-brainer that she's going to end up as the leading scorer of all time and probably leading scorer all time ever. So not just for women. So, yeah, she's right up there. Now, you know, Fiskus was an all-around player. She's second in career rebounds, which is scoring and rebounds. That's pretty good. And some people would put Christy Smith in there. Christy Smith, I don't think there's ever been a consistent laid-back All-American, consensus All-American, like maybe a second team or all that. And I don't think Dungey is going to be that. But if you wanted to rate best of all time by that ranking or whatever, there's different ways you could do it. But I would just say those 2 or 3, and you might throw Delmonica DeHorny in there, a great center they had years ago. But there's not a lot of girls you could put up there and say the best. So Dungey's right in there.
Yeah, and it's also, you know, important to point out, you talk about Christy Smith, and that was, you know, back when Gary Blair was still here. But college basketball for women has gotten substantially better. So maybe Chelsea Dungey right now inserted into a Christy Smith lineup, she could have been there. But the way that women's college basketball is right now, it's hard.
I promise you, the old Southwest Conference when Betty Fiskus played, that's not any comparison to what is the SEC now. So you might could make an argument that Dungey is the best. Yeah, when you kind of like compare and contrast with what the league looks like in the sport all around, absolutely. All right, Hog asks, can you discuss the Hog Baseball schedule? Not sure I've even seen the SEC so stacked, and then add in games in Arlington against top-ranked teams for maybe the toughest schedule ever. It's brutal. If you look at it and really break it down, it's brutal. I got it right here. 6 top 10 teams. Now, this is preseason, and you can go by different ones. This is D1 baseball's version. Arkansas comes in ranked 8th in the preseason with D1 baseball. 6 top 10 teams on the schedule. 10 top 25 teams. This is who they're going to play this year if this works out this way. If these teams stay similar to the ranking here. Number 1, Florida. Number 3, Texas Tech. Number 6, Ole Miss. Number 7, Mississippi State. Number 9, Texas. Number 10, TCU. Number 12, LSU. Number 18, South Carolina. Number 19, Tennessee. Number 23, Auburn. The only ranked SEC team that they don't play is Vanderbilt, and they're ranked 4th. Yeah. Think about that. Which is a nice break for once. But think about this. You've got all these ranked SEC teams, and you're playing all of them but one? I don't know how that happened. Some of it is the SEC West, which you can't control. But, I mean, they're playing Florida, Tennessee, South Carolina. All of those are ranked teams from the East. So it's brutal. And then throw in this. This is what most people aren't looking at. They're playing 4 in-state teams this year. UCA, Little Rock, UAPB, and Arkansas State. All of those games, those teams are going to be going all out to try to beat you. Those are midweek games. They aren't normal midweek games. I can foresee in some of these midweek games, these teams taking their weekend pitchers and pitching a midweek to try and win it. It's what Little Rock did 2 years ago against Arkansas, and they came in, put up, I think, 11 or 12 on the Razorbacks, and that's what you're saying is you think once you get to SEC play, you've got some midweek games that are supposed to be easy. But those 4 are not going to be easy because they're pumped up to come in here and play or to play in Little Rock. Yeah, I think this is going to be a very good team for Arkansas. Defensively, they may be the best in the country. They're really good defensively. They can hit. We've watched them in the preseason. They can hit for power. I don't think there's going to be a drop-off in home runs this year. But the question mark then is the pitching. Well, what about the pitching? Well, he's absolutely loaded with arms. And a lot of experienced guys combining with young guys that looked really promising. The real issue there is they don't have a starting rotation. And Wicklander and Connor Nolan did not pitch all that well in the fall, and I don't think they're tearing it up in the preseason. So that's created a question mark. Vermillion is going to be one of the starters. It looks like the Paulette kid, what's he, from Benton? From Benton. He's going to be a starter, and so as of we sit here right now, Dave Van Horn has one more guy to figure out. And he said, we may even decide this because they're indoors now. They're for 2 or 3 days, they've been working out indoors. And thankfully, they have that indoor facility. Imagine what it would be like if they didn't and they were just stuck. I've seen them in years past, before that thing was built. They'd be over there in the football complex trying to make things work in there. So But he will apparently come up with that third starter based on what they do over there in the indoor here in the next 2 or 3 days.
Yeah. He's got a lot of weapons over there in his bullpen, and you know, he's even said there are some guys that we think could be relievers for us who feel like they should be starters for us, and you know, it's not a bad problem to have, but you definitely want to get it right.
I think in the end they're going to have good pitching to go along with good hitting and really good defense. But that schedule that we go back to, I mean, you could be really good and get bit in the rear end by this schedule badly.
But at the end of the day, like, you know, Arkansas has kind of set themselves up. I mean, baseball in the SEC has gotten so good. And the good thing is, this isn't like football where we look at a football schedule and it's terrifying sometimes because of all the other ranked teams in the SEC and where the football program, you know, was and has been. This is a baseball program that can really do damage as well. It's not scary. I mean, you can't be intimidated.
Yeah, this is a sport in which Alabama is intimidated.
Yeah, they don't have a top 25 team.
So they're sitting there looking at all these other teams.
All their eggs are in their football and basketball programs right now. So, all right. Super Hog 1959 wants to know in 2006 the Razorbacks had Darren McFadden, Felix Jones, Peyton Hillis, Marcus Monk, and a 5-star QB named Mitch Mustaine, and a future national championship winner as an offensive coordinator named Gus Malzahn. The team started 10-1, nut-pulled Mitch, and appeared to take over the offense. We lost the last 3 games. Why and how did this happen? Oh my gosh, this answer is a page long because you opened up a can of worms. Pandora's box for Mike.
It's going to take me longer to ad-lib it.
If you want to be here for an hour, ask Mike about Mitch Mustaine.
Well, and that whole thing. First of all, he's a little bit mixed up on the way that came down. Arkansas was actually 7-1 when the change was made, and the change was made right after the start of the South Carolina game. So it happened during a game. So they were 7-1 at that point. They actually won that game, but to me, they went 7-1 with Malzahn as the offensive coordinator, Mustaine and Mustaine really went 8-0 because he wasn't the quarterback when they lost to USC in the season opener. And then they actually went to 10-1 and then lost their last 3. Now, the big question is, why did that happen? It's very complicated. It all has to do with Frank Broyles, who was in his early 80s at that point. And John White, the chancellor, felt like he was too old to be an AD, was trying to force him out. There were some boosters, big-time boosters, that were backing up Frank. And why were they worried about Frank being replaced? Because Frank ran the athletic department in a way that they liked. It was fan-friendly. It was based on opening your program up to your boosters, to your ordinary fans. Frank had an open-door policy. You could come up on vacation from Ashdown with your family and walk in that Broyles Center and he would give you a tour. You didn't have to be some big shot. He loved the fans and he ran the athletic department like a business. Now, what they were worried about is if John White forces Frank out and brings his own AD in there, what kind of AD is he going to get? Well, he's going to get one of these PhD ADs, and what do they do? Well, let me explain the difference between athletics as a business and regular business. If you go to Walmart and you like Walmart and they're always giving you good prices and they're nice to you and you feel comfortable, you will go there. But what if Walmart's, those people in there suddenly started being mean to you and they started raising their prices and it wasn't the place that it used to be? You'd go, I'm going to find another place to go. And you would go because we have competition in business and you'd find a friendlier place and you'd switch. That doesn't happen in athletics. People are loyal. You're a Florida State fan. What if Florida State started doing things you didn't like? You wouldn't just suddenly stop being a Florida State fan. You don't like it when they lose. What if they got a crummy AD and he did things you didn't like?
Yeah, like kick Jimbo Fisher out?
Yeah, and stupid things like that. You wouldn't stop being a fan just because of that.
You get angry for a while and then you get over it.
So they're worried about, okay, Frank's run this place fan-friendly.
Yeah.
I mean, he did things like, if you didn't have the money for your season tickets in the summer before a football season, he'd let you pay at the end of the year. He'd let you work it out. They don't do stuff like that anymore. And so these boosters knew that was going to go out the window. We were going to get an AD that would say, hey, we're going to do it this way, and if you don't like it, we'll just get another fan to come in here and buy your season tickets. We don't have to put up with this. We got a monopoly. You're a Razorback fan, and you're not going to become some other fan. And that's what they were worried about. So what are they going to do about it? Well, they got this other problem, and Frank doesn't want to retire either, and so they're going to have to figure out a way to make him retire, and they're going to have to find a replacement for him, but somebody that knows the way, that will do what Frank did. Guess who that was? And they all sat down and had a meeting and figured out who it was. Houston Nutt. Why? Because he grew up in this state, because he knew all about the helmet and the Razorbacks and all this stuff. And Nutt was a guy that would continue those policies. He was a guy they could see going out to all these Razorback Club meetings in places like Benton and all across the state and eating chicken and getting people pumped up and get up and give a speech. Nutt could give a speech. He'd get these people pumped up. And they thought he would be our perfect AD. But if you make him the AD, they don't want him to be the head coach. So they got to have a head coach. Who's that going to be? They love Gus Malzahn over at Springdale. They were convinced he was the best kept secret in America. You get this guy over here as offensive coordinator. You unleash that offense. We'll start winning championships. Nutt can win a couple of championships. He'll be happy. Then we'll come to him at the appropriate time and say, you know what, Houston? This is awesome, but guess what? You got to take one for the team. You've got to become the AD and keep this thing going, or you're going to end up with a boss you don't like. And they thought they could pull it off, but they never talked to Nutt about it. They never talked to Frank about it. I think Gus was the only one that knew about this plan. So they backed Houston into a corner because he'd had back-to-back losing seasons. He didn't have a lot of clout at that point. One more losing season, he was going to be fired. So they tell him, for your own good, we're bringing this guy in. He will change the offense. We'll win this year, blah, 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 blah. He goes, okay. Then right after he hires Gus Malzahn, he finds out about the plan. And it's like, uh-oh, these guys are trying to kick me out as head coach. Mm-hmm. And he got mad. He got mad at Gus, his supporters, these boosters. And I don't know how Mitch Mustang got dragged into all this. I do know that all of Frank's or Houston supporters were saying Mitch and his mom were in there trying to make this happen. That was the biggest bunch of baloney. I knew that kid. I knew his mom. He didn't want Gus Malzahn as the head coach. He didn't want him as the offensive coordinator. The reason he wasn't the quarterback's coach, Mitch decommitted the day Gus was hired. Decommitted. And he'd been committed all during the football season.
And he was his high school coach.
Yes, and the only reason that they got Mitch back was because they had a meeting with him, and they told him, well, Gus is not going to be the quarterback's coach. He's going to be the wide receiver. Gus knew how to play this, and he told him, well, just move me over to wide receivers coach. And they hired a coach out of the NFL and made him the quarterback's coach, and told Mitch, hey, we're going to run this NFL offense. Mitch wanted to run a pro-style offense. He wasn't tied to the hurry-up, no-huddle. That was his high school offense. But everybody said, oh, he wants to run the hurry-up, no-huddle, and he wants Nutt fired. Total garbage. He got wrapped up in all this. People on message boards started saying what a jerk he was. His mom's trying to run the team. He's trying to get Houston fired. He's sitting there scratching his head going, where's all this stuff coming from? In the meantime, it turns into a political fight between people that like Houston, people that like Gus. Houston cleverly used the 10-win season to demote Gus at the end. He'd won 10 games. He wasn't in danger of being fired anymore, and Frank was now on his side too. And he convinced Frank, we need to get Gus out of here. So he demoted him with the idea he'd probably leave, which he did. He thought Mustang would stay at that point. But what happened to Mitch, and I talked to him about it, he was so tired of being reinvented, people telling him, writing about him as if he was not even around, that they could just take him and turn him into whoever they wanted him to be. And so he's this bad guy that's trying to get Nutt fired, and he wants to run his own offense. And none of that stuff was true, but he was just sick of it when it was over. And he told me when he committed to USC, he said, why did I commit to USC? look at a map. It's about as far away from Arkansas as you can get, and I want out of this situation. And to this day, he doesn't live here. He lives in Arizona, and he comes back to visit his mom, but he feels like the state of Arkansas turned on him for no reason. And that's why this whole thing makes me mad. The other thing is this. What happened? Now, you see how this all blows up. Nutt leaves, all this crazy stuff happens. It all started with boosters. Maybe they were well-meaning, but look what happened, how it blew up. Now, this happens at Auburn. Go talk to any Auburn fan. We got one that works in this building. They've got a booster and a bunch of lower boosters that are always firing people. Malzahn's out because of those people. It just never works. You get an AD and you let your AD. If you don't like what your AD's doing, fire him. But don't let boosters run the program. And 11 years after this mess, guess what happened? Here comes Gus again. They thought they could get him. All these guys, we're going to bring him in. So they fire Jeff Long. Bielema's out. And they think they can get Gus. Well, Gus uses their interest to get him a $7 million a year, $7 million 7-year contract, $49 million with a big buyout. He has that contract at Auburn. He stays. They thought they were going to get him. Instead, guess who we end up with? Chad Morris. So it's just never good when boosters get involved.
All right. I have to apologize. I did skip a question this week. So,
Okay.
and an Austin Hog fan has a question about basketball, and I apologize again to our people in the back. Perfect. There they are. Wondering why I skipped this. Let's go back to it. We now are in the second place overall in the SEC in basketball, which anyone would have taken to start the year. How do you see this ending up record-wise, and what seed in the NCAA tournament in your favorite place, Indianapolis?
Okay. This is a conservative guess.
Okay.
They've got these 3 games left that are problematic. Florida, Alabama, LSU. But those are all home games. Let's be conservative and say they only win one of those games. But then and I don't know that they're going to play A&M because they've had so many COVID issues, but let's say they play A&M in South Carolina. Well, if they win one of those games and win these other 2 games, they're going to go 3-2, and then even if they just go 1-1 in the SEC tournament, again, this is conservative, they would end up 20-8 on the season. That would be, what did they win last year? They were 20-12. So they're much improved this year. I could see them as a 9 seed, even if this happens that I just laid out. But I think they can do better than that. And if they win more games in the SEC tournament, if they happen to win 2 of those games instead of 1, they might end up at a 7 or 8 seed, 7 seed, probably not a 6 seed, but it looks good right now. I mean, it could all fall apart, but you got to admit this team is playing a lot better than it was.
Playing the best basketball they need to be playing at the right time, and that's
Those
what they
2 teams.
That's what they always say. You want to be playing good at the end of February.
Kentucky would have beaten a lot of teams the night they played Arkansas. And Missouri, give their coach a lot of credit because he loses his starting center before that game completely changes his strategy. They suddenly become a 3-point shooting team, which they're not. And they hit 13 threes. And their defense that they played on Arkansas, they totally disrupted them in the first half. But Arkansas just kept working and working and working. I told somebody at the end of that game, that is the hardest I've ever seen a team work to win a game. It looked like it's won, no it's not, yes it is, no it's not, yes it is, no it's not. And then when that goaltending thing happened and because of the whistle, they didn't allow Arkansas the rebound, I thought this is like the Auburn football game all over again. These guys are going to get the ball back. They're going to score here with 20 seconds, 15 seconds to go, and they're going to win. And the reason that didn't happen was because of Moses Moody. He got that turnover, took the ball away from that guy as he was trying to shoot. And so they won it. And these guys, I said yesterday on the pig trail, they've learned to hit curveballs. You know, when somebody throws something in their way now, it doesn't affect them like it did before.
All right, one last one. Alyssa Orange wants to know, how do you feel about UCF hiring Terry Mohajir away from A-State, then Terry turning around and hiring Gus Malzahn?
You had to almost know that was going to happen, right?
Hey, does that mean that Terry Mohajir could have been the AD that got Gus Malzahn back to Arkansas? Or was that still just a ploy?
Well, I think if he had been hired instead of Juracek, maybe. I don't know. I don't think – it's always hard to judge this, but I've told you this before. I have all these Facebook friends that I don't know that are fans just so I can go read their Facebook page and see what they're saying about certain things. It's my impression right now that Gus is not all that popular with Razorback fans. I'm sure there's some that still like him. So I don't know that trying to sell that this time around, if Pittman wasn't here, probably wouldn't work. But it is interesting. I'm just sitting around during this whole month and a half, whatever, after football, after the regular season, I'm going, where's Gus going to, when's he going to get a job? Somebody's going to hire him. I didn't see that one coming. I didn't think he would, Mahajer would leave Arkansas State. I mean, he played there. Why would he leave there? And he just done something no other Arkansas State had ever been able to. He got Arkansas to play him.
Yeah.
He's like on the king of the hill now.
Yeah.
And he just used that. Boom, I've got another job. Now, we'll say this. If I project myself as a head coach, I'm going there. I don't care. It's Florida.
Hey, I was about to say, you know what's
Orlando.
Yeah, you know what it's not doing in Orlando right now that it's doing in Arkansas?
I'd get fired though because
snowing. It is not snowing, and it is warm.
I'd be at Disney World every day.
Yeah.
I'd say, where's the coach? Oh, he's down at Disney World.
I'm over at Harry Potter World. if you need me, come find me. I know it's
SeaWorld, Universal Studios, all that stuff they have there, and they got these great golf courses all over the place.
Yeah.
The only thing they have that I don't like is they got alligators there. I don't like alligators.
they got big alligators.
They can get your dog.
Oh, but they got good
You
seafood.
let your dog run.
But you don't like seafood either, so you'd be out on that too.
But I'd be all over Orlando.
No, it's fun. It's fun. UCF is giant too, but that's, we don't need to open up that can of worms. All right, that's going to do it for Ask Mike. Remember, if you've got a question for Ask Mike, hit us up on hogville.net. Of course, you can always send it to us as well on Twitter and Facebook. Just make sure you're telling us it's for Ask Mike, because Mike loves answering your questions.
We do.
It's the highlight of his week. We'll see you next week.